Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the pleasure to welcome a non-profit organization called Red Line Service, based here in Chicago. And with them, I will talk about the issue of homelessness in the city of Chicago. Ms. Tracey is a board member. Rhoda is the executive director. So I just want to take the time to welcome both of you under the Human Rights Tree.
Thank you, Alpha. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Before we start talking about your vision, mission, and the goal of your organization, I just want to know a little bit about you. I'm going to start with Ms. Tracey.
Well, let's see. I've been a Red Line Service artist for about, I don't know, a little more than 5 years, I believe. And last year, it was my honor to begin serving on the board, which has been a very exciting experience. My experience overall with Red Line has truly been unique and very special. I don't want to steal anyone else's thunder, so I'm not going to go into all of the details, but once this interview is over, you will truly understand why I believe that Red Line is unique and special.
Thank you. So behind the title, Executive Director, can you tell us a little bit who is Rhoda as a person?
I'm Rhoda Rosen. I'm the Executive Director of Red Line Service. And technically we're actually Red Line Service Institute, but we really sort of don't use the Institute. And I also teach at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. And I have a professional life of being in either museums or universities. And in both those places, but particularly for this, well, both those places, there are high barriers to accessing content. And to feeling welcome in those spaces. And so Red Line Service is really a way in which we're able to create or remove the barriers to access in the arts for people who experience houselessness.
Red Line Service, why the name?
Thank you. Red Line Service, for those people who don't live in Chicago, is the name of one of the main train lines in Chicago. It's one of only 2 overnight lines. So it's a place that people use as home. People ride the trains. It's also a line that connects one of the more wealthy suburbs in Chicago, or the north of Chicago, to their line that goes into the suburbs, the Purple Line. And so it's one of the only lines where people of different socioeconomic groups are mixing on all the trains, but it can be quite fraught on the Red Line. But the main reason is that people are forced to ride trains to stay alive in Chicago's really cold weather. And so our very first actions were on the platforms at either end of the Red Line, 95th and Howard Street, where we would go out in a polar vortex winter overnight from midnight till about 4 a.m. when the food ran out. And we would take my co-founder, Billy McGinnis, who's an artist and also a teacher at the School of the Art Institute, we would take a dining room table, a tablecloth, chairs, home-cooked meals, plates, flowers for the table, all the things that you would really get in a home, in order to sort of show how many people this constitutes home. And we would just sit and talk to people, because it's at the end of the line, 95th and Howard, that people are forced off the train and they have to get on another train going in the opposite direction. So they never ever get to sleep, because at each stop there's that automated announcement that says doors are opening on the left, all of that. And then at the end they're actually helped off the train until they can take another train in the opposite direction. So there's the issue of rest and how weary people are as riders of the Red Line was really important to us. And so we created these comfort stations that then we heard from people that they understood and wanted arts programming, but didn't feel welcome in the spaces in the city where such programming happens. And so we moved indoors and committed to removing the barriers to artistic access.
So as an art professor, you happen to take the Red Line, I'm guessing, to go to work. Mm-hmm. And through that process of taking the Red Line, you basically made the observation, seeing a part of the population, some people who don't have where to sleep are using the Red Line as a way to find a safe place to be from winter and have where to sleep. And I'm guessing this is the observation that triggered the idea of the organization. But how long it take you to say, I need to do something?
Alva, I get where you're going. Thank you so much for helping me through that. I actually said earlier that the incidents on the Red Line, particularly in the winter of 2013-14, which is when I was observing these things, and since, there were many, many incidents on the train, including I watched on my way back from school ends at 9 p.m. It did end at 9 p.m. and was on my way home quite late at night. And a young woman got on the train and called the police on a man who was sleeping on the train. Remember, the train seats are already so reduced in size that people can't stretch out on them. So the architecture of the train is already quite hostile. But she, for $2.25, which was the price of a ticket, she felt entitled to make this call because she didn't think her ride should include a person sleeping, right? So I asked questions about at what point are you entitled to these phone calls, or what prompts you to do all that? And I was on an art residency with Billy McGuinness. That's where we met, on an art residency, and we started to have these conversations, and we decided to try the comfort stations. Should we put showers on either end of the platform? Should we do this? Should we do that? And we did this. And so to your point about what's the trajectory, we didn't have one. And I think that's a really important point. We were an artist project, a collaborative, informally working through fiscal sponsors until 2020 when we incorporated. But during the 2014 to 2020 time period, we learned a lot. We learned a ton. And we learned a ton by just going out and doing those things and iterating. We really didn't know in advance what needed to be done. It was really from the beginning that we understood that other voices would shape what the community would become. So
the organization, if I'm not mistaken, was born in 2020?
It was born in 2014. It became a 501c3 in 2020. That's really important for us because of how much learning and how much trust was built in the 2014 to 2020 period, and how much yielding we had already done to a community that really should be at the center of the project, and now is at the center of the project.
So basically, you didn't just wake up and decide to create the organization. You went through grassroots working, talking to the people, and trying to get what need to be done. After doing that, after creating a Red Line service, what is the vision of Red Line service? And further, what are the mission you have as an organization?
Yeah, well, I think Tracey can speak to that, right?
Our mission starts out, the first sentence is led by people with a lived experience of homelessness. And we have a large sign that we display at many of our events that says Redline Service is the intersection between houselessness and the arts. And so at every layer, I hesitate to say level, but in every part of Redline Service, the voice of the homeless people and the houseless people is heard, be it on the board, be it in committees, be it in the general membership. Every person's voice is important, and every person's need is considered. And because all of the people at these different layers understand, or I would say at least 90% of people have experienced homelessness, housing insecurity, often extreme housing insecurity, we all are speaking the same language. And so when change needs to happen, we can understand that. When you say that, or we were just talking about this the other day, that in some of our events, people have been known to doze off because they are houseless. So they feel that level of comfort and that level of care where they can doze off in our presence and know that they are safe to do so. So it is so important to me that, we know where each other is coming from, and that knowledge is in all of our guidelines, that knowledge is in our programming, that knowledge is embedded in everything that we do. And when I said Redline Service is unique before, this is one of the areas that to me makes it extremely unique.
Ms. Tracey, you made an important point, knowing where you are coming from. I'm guessing as you share your story, a briefing about the history of the organization, you come from a place of care, of caring and listening to the homeless population. And I'm wondering now, as a vision, what is going to be the pinnacle of your achievement as an organization?
Oh my goodness. Well, that ultimately that everyone feels as we do, that everyone's voice is important, that everyone's art, everyone's creativity, everyone's situation is of importance. Everyone has value. Everyone has something to share, an expertise, a knowledge that is valuable. I could go on and on about that for a long time. But we want the wonderful oasis that is Redline Service. We want that to be everywhere.
A place.
So, yes.
A place where people feel respected, people
Yes.
feel treated equally.
Yes.
I have often a broadcast in which I invite artists, and I call it art and activism. And I feel like this, your project go to that level, because in Africa, the artists are called the griot, and the griot often play an important role. The role of the griot is basically to study the issues of society and trying to find a solution to those things. And I think it's what you are doing. Me, as many people living in Chicago, we walk in the street and we see homeless people. And in many ways, we, saying it or not saying it, we come up with some prejudices. If they are homeless, it's because they want it, or is there, or we trying to ignore the issue. I just want to know, you, through your work, by talking to that population, how people can end up being people who have a job, working, having a house, to crossing the bridge and one day end up without a house. Things. What are the stories you hear from them?
I really appreciate that question, because another wonderful part of Redline Service is our work to destigmatize houselessness. We want the blame to be shifted from the individual to the societal systems that have caused the person to be houseless. People who have had terrible health conditions that have required them to leave their work and lose all assets to pay for the needed health care didn't ask to be homeless. But they are made homeless by a healthcare system and the ways in which our society penalizes poor health. And now they find themselves in this circumstance. People who are suffering from mental illness and go through these same kinds of situations. Perhaps they are separated from family, from friends, etc. They did not ask to be houseless, but circumstances have conspired to make them so. So we could go on and on with that. There are many people, we have the working poor. They are working every day, but they cannot make enough to sustain a household. So there are so many stories and situations that result in people being houseless through no fault of their own.
I think you made an important point about the solution is based on switching the view. Then say this is a social problem, not an individual problem. And I think this narrative need to be heard, because often we live in this society, you are the one who make it happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's your fault. And we kind of take away the responsibility of our society. So how many people come to your, how many people who call themselves homeless come to your event? And when they come to your event, what do you do together?
Thank you so much for that, Alpha. And I just want to lift up what Tracey said, because she said it so brilliantly, right? There are all sorts of ways in which our mission is to shift the narrative of homelessness to, or what we call houselessness, for the same reason, because people will make shelter wherever they find themselves. They will do something beautiful or create community on this train or under a viaduct or whatever, but it's the house that they don't have, right? So to point to that systemic issue, we often use the term houseless. And so Tracey really sort of did that so well. And I just wanted to add one piece to that, which is the fact that Tracey knows these stories is not something that's required of people. So we know that privacy is something that middle class people, that belongs to the middle class. Very often, if you're housing insecure or you're houseless, the first thing you have to do is apply for some service, and you have to give up your story or a social security or something, right? But here we don't ask you, if you're houseless, right? It's not that. That's why we say houseless and housing insecure, because we're not going to turn you away because there's some qualification that's a barrier to the program.
So being a homeless is not a requirement.
Yeah, I mean, people are poor, right? I mean, people are living below the poverty line, and most people are houseless and living with housing insecurity. But the issue isn't that there is a qualification to belonging or to being a part of our programming. It's open and inclusive in a way that direct service can't be. And so I just wanted to make that point about privacy, that people's privacy we really, really protect. And the second piece of that is what Tracey said, is people's expertise, because we do value it as an expertise, and therefore we pay for it. So we pay, Tracey was talking about the working poor, we don't pay people per hour the minimum wage. We pay people at the Chicago housing wage, which is the amount per hour you need to actually afford a studio apartment in Chicago. and we pay everyone who makes art for us, serves on the board or serves on a committee, who has the experience of being houseless. So if people come to us, our regular programming includes, that was by way of digression, but back to your question, if someone comes to, and the other thing you asked is 4,509 people had an encounter with Redline Service this year. That includes the unhoused, right, who came to an art exhibition or an art fair or a puppet performance that our actors were in. The whole point is for the interaction between people who might have those stereotypes you previously outlined, and then actually see the creativity that we're warehousing in society, and that breaks the stereotype and destigmatizes houselessness immediately. And it shifts that narrative that we were talking about previously. And when you come to us on a regular basis, and there were 187 new people with lived experience of houselessness who attended one of our programs this year, plus our regular audience. And if you come to us, you will see a monthly VIP field trip that's behind the scenes at a cultural institution. You'll see a lunch and learn or an art history series or a design series. And then we also make art. So there's a full sort of continuum of what cultural and intellectual, it's like a mini humanities festival, honestly.
Therefore, if I have understanding of what you're saying, your services involve a trip, also education, and the third is having a place where you can call a home, basically has a community where you can feel like you belong. So as far as a journey, can you give us at least, you and Tracey, Miss Tracey, can you give us 2 journeys that mark your members? Well, they went to that journey, they say, oh, I really enjoy it, and the reason why they enjoy the journey.
Are we talking about events that they may have participated in, or how they were enriched by?
I'm talking about a trip you took, because you offer trip, if I'm not mistaken. You took a trip together and visit a place, and you get a feedback from that trip. Can you share a trip you took and really enjoyed, and the reason why you enjoyed the trip?
We have taken so many trips to galleries, museums. Let me see. We have taken a few trips. Okay, I'll pick one for expediency, but that was also very meaningful. We have taken several trips to the Smart Museum. And we've seen a number of exhibitions there. And what makes them special for me is we do have an opportunity to explore just, individually, but we actually have someone there who takes us on guided tours, and we are able to ask questions and explanations are given. And it's very meaningful for me because I can see when people are inspired by the art that they see. I can see when those questions are bubbling up. And the people that we work with, that we've had the pleasure of working with at different galleries, museums, etc., are so, I think they're kind of enlivened by us. I think it's mutually exciting when they see that we are truly interested in what they have to say. It really is the give and take. It just goes to another level. because we're not there just, browsing around. We want to know. We want to hear about this. We want to know about this artist. We want to know what they were thinking and feeling. We want to talk about how it makes us feel. So if you ask every Red Line Service member, they're probably going to tell you a different experience like this one that they've had at the different places that we've gone. Because we have people who are very interested in photography. We have people who are very interested in sculpture, in oils, in watercolors. And so each person is going to get something different from these experiences that we have. But what I get, and this is the wonderful thing for me as I try to create my art, I get inspiration. I get to see what other people are doing, and it makes such an impact when those doors are thrown open to um, to places where they have traditionally been closed. I mean, it is a mind-opening experience.
Thank you for sharing. I don't know where is, even me, I don't know where Smart Museum is located. Maybe it's the opportunity for me to check it out and see, go and visit. Rhoda, would you mind share one of the highlight trip that you think your members really enjoy during your trips?
To Tracey's point, we've been on so many trips, and Alpha, I will just say upcoming, we're going on our first out of town. Oh, we also, one of my favorite, well, so many, but
go ahead.
Coming up, I'm sort of super excited because we're going on our first out of town trip. We're going to Sheboygan, Wisconsin on a bus to see the Kohler Arts Preserve and the Kohler Art Center. And so we're expanding. That's sort of a sign of expansion, and we'll learn all sorts of things, right? And we're always learning every single time we iterate something like the VIP field trips. But I think, just to add to what Tracey says, it's not just that everyone who shares is so generous with their time and content, but also that we ask that it's the director or the curator who takes us around. So it truly is a VIP trip, like someone who's a professional in the arts would expect when going to, or could anticipate when going on a behind the scenes adventure. And just to say that there isn't an event that doesn't also include a meal. So we share a meal family style. Sometimes during COVID, we had to do boxed lunches, but we share a meal. And that really, we ask the person who is the speaker or the field trip deliverer that they share it with us. And that's a big part of where people get to know one another and where stereotypes break, right? So I'm excited about the upcoming Sheboygan trip for sure.
So basically, I think you're going further. I truly believe one of the best school is traveling. Traveling, I really believe, is one of the best school. And in your case, you are not just going and seeing art and things, but you having somebody who can bring, who can enlighten you about the whole museum, a whole drawing and painting, and that thing can make difference. Because for me, for instance, I am not a professional in art. If I go to a museum, I will admire the colors, the thing, but when it comes to going deep, I may not know. And it's good to have a guide, a professional to guide you. The other point, the other services you providing is education. So your members have opportunity to educate themselves through arts. How is that experience?
Yeah, I guess I would say this is all informal, right? Like we feel that the whole thing is an art project. So the thing that we're framing is the experience that you walk into. We're not, we do make things, and there are products on the wall in our studio at Manor Contemporary, but sometimes, but that's like, that's sort of like a product, but but the art, the real art of social engagement is the experience that we're framing. So and what you're seeing in that engagement when you walk in is people who are houseless, who are at the center of a community, driving, who are co-producing from concept to delivery, the kind of content that will be available. The programming committee that Tracey referenced is currently working on a toolkit because the programming committee believes that the new federal appointed official on homelessness in Chicago and the new city person who's been hired in the mayor's office to address houselessness will speak to some very smart people, but they won't necessarily speak to the range of experiences of houseless people, and they need that knowledge. So they're actually putting together a toolkit, right, that will be artistic expressions by people experiencing houselessness on what they need the federal and city person to know. So there's all these different levels, but what you're seeing, right, the real art is the people at the center co-producing, being paid for expertise, and at a rate that they can live at, not at a rate that's minimum wage. And so that's sort of really important. And so therefore, although we're called Redline Service, I need to problematize this word service for you, which we feel is very difficult challenge. That's why we put it in there, right? Because it's icky. We're not delivering services. We're not delivering something, right? Offering a service immediately has an us and a them. But this is a community determining its own programming and deciding the direction of the organization. And it can be little things. I want you to know that it took a long time for two board members to explain to me last night why the amount that we give every single event, we give train fare to everyone who comes, because we recognize your time. We recognize and appreciate that people take the time for art. Not everyone does, right? So it took two people to explain to me why we had to increase the amount we were given. So it can be from that amount, it can be from that level of decision making all the way to programs, right? We need to do out of town programs or more art making, or we need to get into this sort of program or that kind of program, like this toolkit that's going to go to these federal and city officials. But people are involved at every level, and when it's community led, it's not a service for people.
Personally, by speaking to you, my understanding is you creating different paths to bring people together, and those paths you choose, and those paths in the future may change. You using the path of traveling together. You using the path of educating people who would not have the opportunity to learn art, and you creating a place where people can get out from their loneliness, as their studies put them, to come to a place where they are welcome and treated as equal. And that things, I feel like those part is what resume your goals and name Redline Service. And through the process of doing those things, what your members express in their paintings? Because often when you give them the tools and you leave them alone, they are expressing feelings, stories, emotions. Often in general, what are those expression? And we only have 2 minutes and 5 seconds, and I give the floor to both of you.
I'll take 1 minute and then I'll let Tracey finish. I would just say that we are a space for art, and we believe art is the answer. Not art therapy, not therapy, art, right? And so therefore we don't determine what people should paint about or sing about or make poetry about. In general, we just think the encounter with art is important. Having said that, we do sometimes get the opportunity where people say, you are the experts on this topic, please make an exhibition around houselessness, etc., etc. But we don't try to
impose.
Right. Tracey.
And you took the words out of my mouth. People who are feeling joy in that moment may give us a lovely, joyful painting. People who are upset, conflicted, may give us a piece of art that reflects that, or may give us some words on the subject, some discussion, some poetry. We're not there to regulate. We're there to embrace you and your feelings and what's happening with you in the moment. And here's your space. You go for it and share it with us.
I see. So, I really appreciate your time, taking your time to sharing more about Red Line Service, that is a non-profit organization based here in Chicago. But as I know, each organization have its benefit, but the organizations also have their challenges. So in the future, I would love really have the opportunity to meet you again and talk about the challenges Red Line Service are facing and how you overcome those challenges. Again, Ms. Tracey, board member, Rhoda, Executive Director of Red Line Service, thank you very much for joining me under the Human Rights Tree.
Thank you, Alpha.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.